XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
The new Super 35 sensor that Canon have introduced with the C300 Mark III is quite a big step up from other S35 sensors that they have created before. From the body and the flexibility that gives us in terms of the expansion packs and the interchangeable mount, to the sensor with its increased dynamic range for tackling scenes that possibly we couldn't have tackled or captured faithfully before, I can get more out of this camera. My money goes further. It's as simple as that from a business standpoint. From a creative point of view, it's unquestionably unlocking more creative avenues for us as filmmakers.
The MKE600 is a shotgun microphone ideal for professional video camera applications. Maximal rejection of ambient side noises thanks to pronounced directivity. And because the MKE600 has a very good suppression of structure-borne noise, it makes one of the most versatile all-round shotgun microphones on the market.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Pro AV. Good morning. Did I say good morning? It's definitely the afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Pro AV Live. We are going to be talking today about the C200. So, well, before we get started with that, let me introduce my guest. So I've got Mehdia joining me from Canon. Welcome back, Mehdia. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning.
Depending on how awake
it is
you
good
are.
morning somewhere, so.
It's been a very busy morning, Mehdia.
And it's nice to be back, so.
Absolutely, you're welcome back. So, I think this one is about the C200, and the reason that I have, I think we are often guilty on channels like this of only ever really talking about the brand new products. You know, you release the C300 Mark III, the C500 Mark II, products like that, and we, somebody's saying late evening in Australia. Hi, Peter. Thanks for joining us from Australia. Absolutely. There we go. I was in a different time zone. That was my answer. So I think we're often guilty of only really talking about the new products, whereas what I wanted to do with some more streams going forward, and this is the first one of that, is to spend a little bit of time talking about the most common products that we actually are selling. You know, the current products, the most popular ones. Like the C200 is a classic example of that from you guys, where it's still a really, really popular camera. And it's not, yes, it's not the absolute newest kid on the block that we're all talking about with all the marketing stuff. That's the C300 Mark III and the C500 Mark II, but it's still very, very much a current camera and sitting in the current lineup. So I thought what we'd do is we'd start with a simple product overview presentation, which you've kindly put together for me, Mehdia, to go over what the C200 is, what it can do, what the features are. And that's maybe perhaps aimed at the people who haven't already got a C200, who are looking at it as something that they might buy and something to add to their portfolio for their work. But then I'm very aware that a lot of people, because it's a camera that's been on the market for a while, people might be watching this that already have the camera. So we're also going to turn this into a bit of a Q&A for existing customers after that as well. So if you've got any questions about any of this, whether you're someone who's new to the C200 or an experienced user who's been using it for the last year or so, let us know in the chat. And here, I can see it all here, and we can answer that as we go through. When did you guys actually release the C200, Mehdia? How long has it been on the market?
That was 2017 in May.
2017 in May. So yeah, it's been pretty much exactly 3 years on the market now. Has it really been 3 years?
But I think in the cinema EOS kind of world, 3 years is nothing really, because if we look back at the C300 Mark II,
yep.
It was quite a few years before the 3 came out. Same goes, well, even longer with the C500. But yeah, I think as long as the camera is still capable of being used, and I mean, with the C200 in particular, 3 years, I mean, you probably see online loads of people saying, "Oh, is C200 basically still the camera that you would consider in 2020?" Yeah. And you would, because of everything that the camera is capable of offering.
And we'll go over the specs in more detail in a minute. But
budget
I mean,
as well, so
absolutely. That's the other thing, the big thing that looking back at a camera 3 years later can change is where it sits in the marketplace. I mean, the specs haven't changed much from 3 years ago, but what has changed massively is the price, because this is now a really quite affordable camera.
It's a good price, isn't it?
It's a really good price, and people are still absolutely buying them. And well, actually, somebody's just put in chat, Kane is saying he's getting his C200 from us tomorrow. Can't wait.
That's good to hear.
I would still put the C200 as one of my favorite cameras on the market. I mean, that has changed a little bit now that C300 Mark III's out and C500. They are lovely cameras. But the C200 is a joy to use. It really is. Right, let's get started with some of the presentation, shall we? So I'll bring up the slide. Over to you, Mehdia.
So, as we just mentioned, the C200 was introduced in May 2017. It did strengthen the Cinema EOS range, because we've had before the C100 Mark II, there was nothing really sitting in between, and then you get up to C300 Mark II. Compact camera in terms of the design, HDR support on a budget. And obviously still Super 35, as I said, joining the lineup. Offering 4K and UHD as well. and introducing Cinema Raw Light because it was the first camera to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is just to go over the main spec. So 4K DCI is when recording Cinema Raw Light. As I said, it was the first camera that was capable of recording RAW internally. And with that, you get 10 or 12-bit depending on your frame rate. In full HD, you get up to 120 frames, and that's uncropped. 4K or UHD, MP4 and XFAVC. The XFAVC was added in a firmware update. So initially it was just MP4 up to 150 megabits per second, but now you have the MP4 and XFAVC 150 megabits per second or 160 megabits per second if you're in XFAVC. Dynamic range, again, massive improvement. Again, even looking at C100 Mark II that sits below it. So with the built-in
I mean, this is nearly as much dynamic range as you would find now on the C300 Mark III or the C500 Mark II that sits above it. I mean, they do have more dynamic range than the C200, but you're not talking crazy amounts of difference. This definitely punches way above its weight.
With the C-Log 3, you get, which is the one in a camera, so you get 13 stops of dynamic range. But if you were to use Canon Cinema Raw development software, then you can push it up to 15 stops, which is crazy because only the more expensive 10K or even more cameras that will give you that option in the lineup. In terms of autofocus, so again, that accurate, precise, and fast autofocus with dual pixel CMOS AF. With the face detection option.
It was a camera that changed some of your dual pixel autofocus a bit because it was the first one that introduced that touch screen on it, which we've seen since. Very, very similar touchscreens, slightly different ones, but very similar ones on pretty much every camera you've released since.
Yeah, so the 4-inch LCD with the Touch AF made a massive difference, and there was a firmware update because loads of C300 Mark II users wanted to use that.
Absolutely.
And there are kits available now with that LCD on a C300 Mark II, so which is great because in terms of AF, it does make a massive difference, and even when using Focus Guide, tapping on the screen and changing from one subject to another. Support for HDR workflow, and the filters are up to 10 stops, and Wi-Fi and Ethernet as well. So okay,
this goes over the formats a little bit.
Yeah, so you've got two formats. So you've got Cinema Raw Light, 4K DCI. So you can do up to 60 in 10-bit. If you're doing 50 or 60, it's 10-bit. If you're doing up to 30, it's 12-bit, which is crazy. In terms of UHD, then you have the two options, MP4 or XFAVC, I guess, depending on your workflow and what you need. Again, up to 50 or 60, it is, which I'm pretty sure there would be quite a few questions on there, is a 4008-bit, but it is useful for a number of things. And then autofocus.
When I've always been talking to customers about the C200, I nearly always describe it as two cameras within one body. I mean, the MP4 side of the camera / XFAVC side of the camera being this 8-bit, almost C100 sort of style replacement that is designed for really quick turnaround work, designed for internet delivery, that sort of things and corporate stuff. Brilliant for that. And then it's almost like you get this whole cinema production camera that is tacked into the same body. And then you get this 12-bit raw Cinema Raw Light, which at the time was the only camera in your lineup that could record RAW internally, because the C700 FF and C700 normal one could record RAW, but with the codecs back and all the rest of it. So that it's now sort of had its place explained a little bit more in the lineup with the C300 Mark III and the C500 Mark II, that it sits as part of a trio with those those cameras. But at the time, it did sit in this very strange place. So it was almost the highest end camera that you made, as well as the replacement for the C100, all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially, there are loads of people, obviously, they were skeptical about Cinema Raw Light. They were not sure how good it is. But now, obviously, over the last 3 years, more and more people are actually going into that camera because they can see the flexibility that they get with Cinema Raw Light. And even with the 4208-bit, it is, I think, sometimes we just get hung up on the numbers. But it takes, I mean, if for someone to actually take the camera and shoot MP4 or XFAVC,
Absolutely.
and they can see the difference of that, I mean, the quality difference that the C200 produces. So I think we need to look beyond the numbers when it comes to this camera.
Absolutely, for both of them as well, because with the Cinema Raw Lite, I mean, yes, it's raw, and yes, it is huge files. They are big files, a gigabit a second and all the rest of it. But they do play back very well in editing software. They are supported now, which wasn't the case when the camera was first released. It's now supported in pretty much every major platform out there.
Yeah.
And so if you take that raw side of the camera, it's much easier and more manageable to work with than you might think it is. The only thing that's going to be a problem is the actual physical size of the files. So the amount of media that you need to buy, both CF Express cards, CFast 2 cards, and actual storage hard drive SSDs. And so that's easier to work with than you may think. And then the MP4 side of the camera is better than people may think. Yes, that's very easy to work with. It edits really back nice and easily. It's very small file sizes and it's 8-bit, but it's actually really good quality. If you're doing just YouTube videos, the sort of stuff that we do, I would very happily make every single video for Pro VTV on the 8-bit out of the MP4. We don't, just because we have a better camera sitting right next to it with the C300 Mark II and the C300 and all the rest of it now on the FX9. But I would very happily do the entire production on that 8-bit. It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, and you still have the option. So recording externally, you can still get via the SDI, you can still get up to 2K 4210-bit. So you still have a little bit of flexibility. And then via HDMI, it's 422, but it's 8-bit again for UHD. But again, it's still giving you the option, which is great, I think. So
and get you a better sort of record format with ProRes and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just diving a little bit more. So the combination of the CMOS sensor, so the Super 35mm sensor, the dual digit processor that actually allowed the camera to record Cinema Raw Lite into CFast cards. So the Cinema Raw Lite gets recorded into CFast cards, and then you do have the option to use the two SD cards for MP4 and XFAVC. Again, if you record in Cinema Raw Lite, you can record a 2K proxy in MP4 or XFAVC, so you can choose. Again, that goes into an SD card as well.
Yeah, and that is very convenient. And I think a point of confusion for some people who are new to the camera is the two media types, and then you can't go vice versa on them, because so RAW is the CFast 2.0 cards and MP4 is the SD cards, and there's no cross between them.
Yeah, because RAW needs the speed, hence the CFast card.
Yeah.
Whereas MP4 and XFAVC, now the way it's recorded is much easier, and the SD cards are getting a lot better, a lot faster. So you can actually use an SD card to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you can do in full HD, you can shoot up to 120 frames, and cropped, because again, we've had cameras where you can get a high frame rate, but it's cropped, so you'll end up with a Super 16. Whereas with this one, it is basically still using whole sensor, and it's full HD, so it's still very usable. And I'm pretty sure, I think for most scenarios, I mean, I guess it depends on their people's preference in terms of how they want to record slow motion. I mean, you can record 50 or 16, so it can take back at 24, 30 or 25, depending on what you're shooting. But this is just another option that you have, which I think is great.
I'm just going to jump in with a question, just because I've just seen it come in, and while we're on the slow motion slide, Daniel is saying, do you guys know if the quality of the 120 frames a second gets better when recorded externally in HD 10-bit? So you wouldn't be able to get the 120 frames a second if you record it externally. The camera will only output the 25 frames a second, the real time. So even if you're in 120 frames a second mode, you're not getting 120 frames a second.
Yeah, it won't be 120 out,
HDMI or the SDI ports. So internal recording is your only option for the slow motion. And that would be the case along most other cameras. The exception to that is when they start doing a raw output, which you see on some cameras, to do higher speed outputs for external recorders.
Yeah, and you need a giant external recorder and a very expensive one.
Yep.
No.
So no, all of this slow motion stuff is internal.
Internal, yeah.
Okay.
Oversampling. So this is something that we talk about in pretty much every single Cinema EOS camera. We even have it on a C100 Mark II. So the camera uses the 4K resolution to produce higher quality 2K and full HD. You would see the difference, I think, if you were to compare footage from a full HD recorded just as it is, and then a full HD or a 2K from a 4K resolution, there is a significant difference in terms of resolution, how sharp the footage is. Plus, you get less moire and less noise as well. So again, this is another great feature that we have in all our Cinema EOS cameras, and it does make a massive difference.
It does. Oversampling is always welcome. I mean, you don't get any oversampling in this camera if you want to be recording in 4K as your final deliverable.
No.
But which you would get on something like the C500 Mark II, which has
the
a
C500 does because it has
sensor.
yeah.
But if you're wanting a 2K workflow, there is absolutely huge reasons to record in 4K and oversample in post, or to do it in camera like this is. You just get a lower noise floor, better color. It basically improves pretty much every aspect of an image.
Okay, so I think this is my favorite when it comes to talking pretty much about most of our cameras now. Since we've introduced dual pixel CMOS AF, I think it changed. I would guess it changed the world for everyone, really. I mean, it was more popular initially in the photo side, but I think more videographers and filmmakers are trusting it more and more. And I think with the C200, because of a massive improvement compared to the dual pixel CMOS AF on a C100 Mark II and C300 Mark II, that massive improvement in terms of the area it covers and in terms of the speed made a massive difference. Plus, with the new LCD, you literally tap on the screen to change your focus, whether it's face, so you can change from one face to another, or you can change from one non-human subject into another, as easy as basically just tapping on that screen. And it's as I said, it's been very popular since we introduced it, which is great.
So there's some talk going on in the comments of the different ways which you can control autofocus, so dial control, touchscreen, all the rest of it. Should we talk through some of those for people who might not be familiar with the system
in terms
already?
of just changing it or setting up the autofocus?
Changing it on the fly is what I was thinking of, but both.
Okay, so I still think the quickest way is tapping on the screen.
Yep.
But you also have the joystick. So the joysticks, you have three options. You have it on the LCD. But then again, I would think if you get your thumb close to the joystick on the LCD, you might as well tap on the screen.
Yep.
You have one on the hand grip. So again, there is another joystick where you can move the AF from one area to another. And then there is one at the back of the camera. So these are so you've got the joystick in three areas where you could do it, or tapping on the screen. Yep. If you're tracking, you can customize a button that actually can start the tracking and then stop the tracking. That's another thing as well. And then depends on how you have your AF set up. So if you're on face detection, they said it will pick up the main face, and then if there is another one, it will pick it up, but you still have your priority face and then another one, and then you can move from one to the other, like I think in that picture it shows. Again, using the screen, so you can tap on the screen to do that, or you can use the joysticks as well to do that.
And then there's the wheel on the side as well, isn't there? The dial, which is how you used to use it on the C300 Mark II. Actually, does the C200 have a wheel on the side of it?
You mean the one on the right-hand side?
Yes.
Or the dial on the grip?
The dial where you can choose between basically the quadrants. So on the C300 Mark II, which is the one I use the most, basically you can rotate the dial, the same one as you might use to change iris or something like that, and it will swap between 4 preset positions like that. I think you can do that on the
there is with the dial on the actual body, which is on the right hand side.
Right.
It's in a closer position to where the ND filters are.
Yes.
Low digital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that one, it basically goes between 4 corners like that, which is quite limiting because you can only have 4 set things until you go over to the joystick and start moving them about. But it is really, really fast. And so if you don't want to use the touch screen, just simply toggling that to do pull focuses or something like that, for example, as long as you're careful, you can mess it up sometimes and overshoot. But say if I'm doing a shot of that and I want to pull focus from this thing in front of me in the desk over to the camera over there, just turning that dial and it'll go to the quadrants, it will lock onto the background. That can be really quite quick for doing just sort of I use that a lot in events and things like that.
Yeah.
That's a very quick way of mentioning it, of changing it.
I think there is another. So the next slide, it will just cover the fine tuning for the AF. This is where you can change the speed of your focus to replicate the focus pull-in, and then the tracking option as well. So if you're filming and you're in an area where there will be obstacles, where there is a tree, where there is people walking past, and you want the camera to keep tracking your main subject and ignoring everything else, then you can slow down that response when it comes to the tracking, or you can speed it up as well. So the camera literally, especially when it comes to people, it will be moving from one to another. But the AF speed one is the one that everyone loves. And when you see the difference, especially demonstrating this, when you slow in that response, because you have the standard, which is just keeping it at 0. But if you were to slow it down and you see how smooth it is, that transition is more natural, and I think more and more people now are using it.
Absolutely. You get 2 sort of camps, don't you? Some people that like it very smooth and like a human would pull focus, and some that just want it to quite quickly
literally jump from one to the other.
From one to the other. So the most important thing I think with this is that it gives you the power to make those changes. And what I see with a lot of other manufacturers with these is that people spend a lot of time trying to fiddle with these until they get the best autofocus. You know, how can I get it so that it doesn't twitch too much and all that sort of stuff. Whereas because the camera's it's got such a powerful autofocus system in it, you don't need to do that. You don't need to twiddle these until you get reliable. It's all pretty reliable. And yes, if you whack it all up to be very sensitive, it will twitch the background a little bit more and all the rest of it. But for the most part, you can go wherever you want in here for creative purposes and still get very reliable, trusting autofocus.
It is, and it's very easy to do as well. So
absolutely.
The next one, this is another one that everyone loves because in terms of face detection, so you have the 2 options: the face priority, which means if there is a face in your frame, the camera will prioritize that face and keep it in focus. Yep. If the person or that face disappeared off the frame, then the camera will just focus on the kind of closest subject to it. Yep. The other option is the face only AF, which is if you have a face, the camera is focusing on that face. The minute the face disappears off that frame, the camera doesn't try to refocus, which loads of videographers find that very, very useful. So you don't have to worry about the camera just picking on something else random to focus on it. The minute the face appears again, then the camera will just pick up focus from there, which is great.
Rinvi is actually asking, does the slower autofocus speed impact face or object tracking as well as just the box moving about? And I believe it does, right?
It's more of the transition. So how quickly it get from A to B, really.
Sure, but once if say you're in face priority mode, in this example here that's up on screen, for example, between an open sign and then her face as she removes the open sign, it would be, that's using the face priority mode, but it would still apply those same speed settings to that transition. Okay, and the focus guide.
Yeah, so this is another great feature, I think, for those that like to use manual focus. So what the camera does is uses the information from the dual pixel CMOS AF to guide you and to make sure that you're achieving focus, especially when we're talking about 4K. I think before with Full HD, it's probably easier. You kind of zoom in to check your focus and you're fine. Whereas with this, with 4K is a lot harder, especially checking it on a smaller LCD. Yep. So as you can see on the pictures, depending on the direction of the middle arrow, you can actually, so the first image, for example, yeah, the middle one is down, which means you just turn your lens to your left to achieve focus a lot quicker, rather than not sure which direction you need to turn the lens in. And the one on the right is the middle arrow is actually pointing up, which means you're rotating your lens to the right hand side to achieve focus quickly. When you achieve your focus, it's green. And then again, you can introduce, when you enable it, it's just one frame, but there is an option to enable the second frame.
Absolutely. So this is so useful for anyone who's using cinema glass or anything like that. And the big thing is that this still works in face detect mode. So you can have one of
actually,
these
with the
boxes
face is
over
great.
someone's face, which is just so useful. So useful.
Yeah, because usually with other lenses or other cameras, if you achieved your manual focus and the person literally even the slight movement, you're going to have to go back and refocus again. So
absolutely. Okay, so this is something that doesn't get talked about quite as much on the camera, and it is in here because obviously this is something which I think we're all going to have to get used to a lot more under current circumstances. The idea of remotely controlling things, and Canon cameras pretty much across the board, if I'm right, certainly in their video lineup, have this browser remote feature.
Yeah, so if the camera like this has the built-in Wi-Fi, then you can do it wirelessly. And then other cameras, like with the C500, for example, and a 300, you have the option to use the wireless file transmitter if you still want to do it wirelessly, or you can get the extension unit, even the smaller one, for the Ethernet port or the Ethernet connection, and you can do it via router and cables, but it's still doable. And it does allow you to basically have a view of what your camera is shooting, or the framing and everything, and then you can go into and change pretty much everything. I mean, you can change where the footage is going, whether it's slot A or B, for example, when it comes to XF, AVC, and MP4, and the filters. You can adjust your focusing, your exposure, so you can change your ISO, shutter speed, etc., white balance, and if you're using a servo lens, you can actually even control the zoom from there. Focus guide is another thing that you can do there as well. So pretty much you get a lot on that, and it's very easy to set up because you can basically set it up directly, so the camera will be talking directly to either your phone, tablet, or your computer.
So this is over Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah.
So basically the camera creates its own Wi-Fi network, you sign into that Wi-Fi
network. That's one
network.
option, or you can do it via a router.
Ah, okay, brilliant.
So the camera can connect to a router and your phone is connected to a router, and you can do it that way.
Okay.
Or they can talk directly to each other ad hoc. So you kind of create, the camera will create a hotspot for itself, and then you go to your phone, tablet, or your computer, you find that. So say, for example, you're setting up C200, you name your SSID C200. You can choose how secure you want it to be. I mean, usually for me, for tests, I just don't use passwords. It's a lot quicker. But obviously, you can secure it. So you put in a password. You add in, there's usually a user and login. So once you get into that link, you log in. So you have a username and a password. Then you can have two users. And then once you go into the phone, tablet, or computer, you connect to that hotspot, so the camera C200, and then you go into the you open your browser, so whether it's Safari or Chrome, and then you type in because obviously the easiest setup is to use auto, but you can be more specific in tab. You can use a manual IP address, so you can be more specific, and it's usually 192.168.0 and then port 80, so 80 at the end, and it literally, you put in that username and password, and you're there. You'll have 3 options. So there is an option just to start and stop recording. So it's very basic. And then there is a kind of a tab for metadata. So you can see all the settings and everything, and how you've got your camera set up. And then the one that you see in that picture where you can see, so you've got the live view bit, so you can see everything that the camera is capturing. And then you have all the controls on the side and bottom of the screen.
I think this is a hugely powerful feature to have in cameras. I mean, we do see it across the board, but when you combine something like this with the dual pixel autofocus, you get a camera which can be really helpful in situations like we're in right now. I mean, we've got a photo there of people using it on a jib, and that's how these things would most normally be used. You get the camera up high, and therefore you can't get to it to actually put an ND filter on or off, and so you need a browser remote to do that. But nowadays, if you don't want too many people in the same room, if you're just a one-man operator, you know, you are literally just a solo camera operator, where you are interviewing somebody and operating the camera all completely by yourself, then fine, you can probably be in the same room as somebody, interview them 2 meters apart, all the rest of it. Whereas if you are working with a producer, for example, and you want the producer in the room with them or actually nearby the subject, you then got to be 2 meters away from that producer. And how do you then operate the camera? Because you've got to get the interviewee's eye line right. So something like this is so useful right now, and we're talking to a lot of customers about using this. Normally, I mean, yes, you do send some image out over the browser remote. Normally people are pairing it with a wireless video sender of some kind as well, although you can get an image there just because it's a bit better. You get more resolution, you get much faster frame rate, so you can judge things a lot better. But with the browser remote to change the actual settings, that to view your image, so something like a SWIP flow unit or a Teradek with a monitor to view the image, and then the dual pixel autofocus on the camera, which can be controlled through browser remote. It's essentially like you're right next to the camera for all intents and purposes.
It is. So there is pretty much no compromise. So once you have the camera set up and you have the angle you want, that's, as I said, you're ready to go. And as I mentioned with the servo lenses, Cine Servo, that's giving you even an added bonus in terms of controlling it. So it's pretty much everything in a simple, I think, simple steps to set up as well. Because you don't need to go anywhere to buy any additional equipment to make it work. With this camera and the built-in Wi-Fi, you can just do it.
Absolutely.
But you have the Ethernet option, so you can do wired as well if you want to.
Yep. Okay. In camera
and then the ND filters. This giving you obviously the flexibility when shooting bright sunlight, and you want to keep your exposure settings. Default is up to 6, so you've got 2, 4, and 6, but you can go through the menu and expand it to get 8 and 10. Again, I think this is one of the features that everyone loves as well, having in these cameras.
Absolutely. I mean, it's needed in pro video cameras really now. These internal ND filters, it's become one of the main reasons to step up to them.
You don't have to worry about which lens I have, or do I have the right size, and I need to fit the right ones on the lenses. So it's all in basically on the body, so you can just
and also finding one that's IR and all the rest of it matches your camera platform well can often be a problem with proper work for variable NDs and all the rest of it for the front of the lens. So having the manufacturer do all that work for you and choose the ND filters that are specific to the sensor, it's just it makes everyone's life so much easier. So simple. Okay, cool.
That's it. So that's for the slide.
So
I think just one thing to mention, again, I'm not sure how up to date everyone is with firmware update, because as I said, we do get feedback, and most of the time if there is something that can be fixed with the firmware update, we do it. And we've done quite a few firmware updates with this camera. As I said, we've added the XFABC. One thing that was announced same time as the C300 Mark III was obviously the firmware update is not out yet, but they've announced the improvements to the C200. And one of them, I think, is what everyone has asked for, is being able to use HDMI and SDI at the same time. And with this camera, is going to open up even more doors, because you can use one for external recording and you can use one for monitoring, which previously you couldn't do because you'll have to keep switching and moving cables. And so that's one of the improvements with this camera.
Okay, I'm going to go through to see if we've got any questions. Now, Barry Griffin from Canon has been doing a brilliant job so thank you, Barry, for answering a lot of these questions for real time for people in the actual chat.
Yeah, I was going to say, if there are any questions, he's not doing a good job, is he?
Oh, exactly. I want to try and pick out ones which might be interesting topics, just
Okay.
for thing. Let's see. How much of an upgrade is the C300 Mark III over the C200 outside of the obvious high frame rates? So those obvious high frame rates, for people who don't know, the cameras are mainly in the 4K side of things. The C300 Mark III gives you essentially what the C200 can do in 1080p, but in 4K. And the quality difference is more than just 1080p to 4K.
Yeah,
It's
I think
lovely.
there is. I think if we were to sit down and go through the differences, you probably need long time to actually cover everything, because
it would
obviously
definitely be its own stream, wouldn't it?
With the C300 Mark III, you have the new DGO sensor, and that already, even if you take everything else out of the equation, that will make a massive difference in terms of the dynamic range and in terms of the ISO performance, or in terms of noise. And then yes, you start adding recording option capabilities. I think probably it really depends on what you want to use the camera for, because there is obviously a price difference.
Huge price difference.
Yeah, especially the price that the C200 is at the moment, for what it is. It's great, but if you think you're going to need the new features on a C300 or the C500, then yes, I mean, there is still the C300 Mark II. That's still a current camera. I know obviously we have the Mark III, but the C300 Mark II is still going to be around. As I said, there is already an option to use that camera with the LCD from a C200. But yeah, the list to compare those two cameras is very long. I mean, I can go through probably 100 plus differences, but there will be a massive difference. Well, I would say a significant difference in terms of the quality of the video, dynamic range, before we start going and then looking at the bit depth and frame rates and everything.
The C300 Mark III is without a doubt a more capable camera all round than the C200, but that does not mean in any way, shape or form that the C200 is not going to be all that people need for a lot of work. For a lot of people, the C200 is just going to fit the bill.
It just, they are two different cameras aimed at two different kind of people or markets.
Absolutely. So we can't all go for the best camera on the market, otherwise we'd go broke. So I think it's perfectly fine. Right. Roy Brown is saying he's considering the B version, which is the one that comes with no touchscreen accessories.
You find
no
nothing basically, just the actual box.
Just the box and the body. He says, will I miss the touchscreen? I have external 5 and 7-inch monitors. I know Barry has been talking to you about this, but I thought it was an interesting point to bring up for everyone else. I don't know about you, Mehdia, but my initial advice would be, yes, you would miss that touchscreen.
I think if you use the touchscreen, you would miss it. I mean, I guess it depends I think for anyone who's experienced the touchscreen, they will definitely miss it.
They don't go back.
I guess if you haven't used anything like that before, then maybe I personally would miss that.
I would miss it. My advice would be spend that little bit extra and go for the touchscreen with it.
It's still a very small, compact camera. Yes, obviously, if you buy the standard version, you have the viewfinder built in as well, which I still, even with that, it's still a small body, which you can easily fit on gimbal or drones. So I don't think that will make it, well, it will make it even smaller, but I think it's still manageable with the standard kit.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm just trying to go through. This is a little difficult. God, Barry, you've been very busy in the comments. Well done. Does the focus guide work on external monitors? That's a good question. If you've got all the overlays on, then yes. It will output the focus guide.
Yeah.
To an external
I can't
monitor.
see why not, to be honest. So.
Yep. Okay. I had this SENOJ Productions has said, I've had my C200 for almost a year and love the image. Currently, I've got two 512GB cards. I'm curious to know if the future of all Canon cinema cameras is going to be CF Express, so I'll know if I should buy more CF. Basically, should he get invested in CFast 2.0 cards? Is the future CF Express? Really difficult one to answer.
It's a tough one because obviously you're looking at the C500 and now the 300 with the CF Express. Obviously, that's needed because of the speed. I mean, CFast cards are fast, but the CF Express are taking it one step higher.
I think what the C300 Mark III and the C500 Mark II have shown us is that, yes, if you're going to be interested in getting the best image quality out of your camera and going up the chain of cameras, yes, CF Express is going to be the future for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, it is, in general, it is the future. In terms of products, I can't really.
Oh yeah, obviously you can't share that. If you are, I think CFast 2 specifically is going to be placed in an interesting point because it is a very common. It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah,
so
it's still going to be around in other cameras
with that, and I could see for the still side of things, particularly that being quite a useful media type still. And SD cards certainly is still not going to be going anywhere. So I think if you're at the C200 level and happy at the C200 level, then I wouldn't worry about it too much. If you know that you're going to be progressing to go up the lineup to the C300, the C500, the C700, going higher up in the chain, then yeah, I would maybe avoid getting too into the CFast 2 world. Because obviously secondhand, you can't just sell on used media and reclaim some of that money. True. People don't really buy used secondhand media. However, saying that, get the media that you need. You know, don't scrimp on media. Media is the core of your entire production. If you are finding on your work that you are tight on media space, then the answer is get another card, even if that is going to be redundant in a year's time or whatever. You need an extra card. It's as simple as that. I wouldn't let it interfere with your production, but obviously it is something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's just getting the right number of cards.
Yes,
that
exactly.
will
Not going
make their life easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, it's a tough one.
Absolutely. Okay, the best CRL workflow settings: CFast to nonlinear editor, Final Cut Pro X, or CFast to Canon RAW developer, then to nonlinear editor like Final Cut Pro X, or is there no difference? It's again from SENOJ Productions. So when the camera was first announced, you had to go through the RAW developer, right? You couldn't go straight into a lot of software, whereas now you can. You can go into Final Cut Pro X. You can
go directly. You
can go into Resolve, you can go into Premiere Pro, you can go into Avid. So pretty much everything that you would want to, you can open up CRM files in.
Yeah, I can't see why there would be a difference. As you said before, it was, I mean, the only thing I'm thinking of, because it's something that I haven't done personally, is the option to go from C-Log 3 to 2.
Yes. So in the camera, for people wondering, you get the option of YDR, normal C-Log, or C-Log 3. Yeah. You can't get C-Log 2 as an option in the camera.
Yeah. So for those that want C-Log 2, they need to record Cinema Raw Lite. And then once you open it in CRD or the Canon Cinema Raw development software, then you do have the option to go from C-Log 3 to C-Log 2. Increasing, as I said, pushing your dynamic range even higher. So that will be, I guess, the difference.
So I'm just trying to find it again, but I did see a really good question which was talking about, does anyone have experience of jumping from Sony over to the Canon and what the differences are? And I think the Sony cameras he mentioned were the FS5 and the Z280, I think it was, both of which are fantastic Sony cameras, don't get me wrong. Obviously, Mehdia, you're going to be fairly biased there. I think. Should we go over to you for the official response there?
Ooh. Well, to be honest, I've been even if I were to forget working for Canon, I've been Canon through and through, stills or video. I think there is one thing that, and it is a personal thing rather than my Canon hat on, is the colors. Everyone love the Canon colors. So the Canon color science is, that's one of the things that I think if you were to, there are so many people online, whether they switch from one manufacturer to another. And usually with Canon, if someone is switching from Sony or another manufacturer to Canon, the color is one of the top, is on the top of their list, basically. How
So
faithful
I found the
the
question.
colors are.
It's from Alpha Zoom. One thing I would say, Alpha Zoom, is Canon work a lot with one of their with a creator called Ollie Kensington, who I've done multiple streams with now for thing. He's not a Canon ambassador, he just happens to be an avid Canon user, and so Canon partner with him for a lot of streams.
C200 user, actually. So.
Yep, he's used the C200 now for a couple of years. The reason I bring him up is that he used to be a Sony user and he's a colorist, so he has a very a much better viewpoint on that than either me or Mehdia. Mehdia works for Canon, I work for Pro AV. I'm not going to stand here and badmouth Sony cameras. They're great Sony cameras. We sell a lot of Sony cameras. His viewpoint on this, though, is really interesting. So specifically because you mentioned the FS5, he did a lot of work with the FS7 and the FS5 Mark II, particularly on the raw outputs and stuff like that, and did find that the noise floor changed dramatically swapping from those to the C200. He pretty much borrowed a C200, did one shot on it in Santa Mobile Light, and then sold all his Sony gear. So I've had that conversation with him a lot on stream and in videos, so definitely go back and have a look at some of those, because he does explain that very well, and because he's a colorist can really go into detail on some of those advantages that he saw. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, Barry is saying there, and so Brett Danton is saying there, who's joined us as well, the C200 pretty much represents the best image for the budget on the market right now. Yeah. Which is certainly a valid argument. I mean, the amount that this camera can do for the money is fantastic.
I mean, I guess it's worth getting a loan and test it.
Yep, absolutely.
Because sometimes if you're not sure how it's going to fit in your workflow, whether you're going to get on with the camera, the quality, it's best to test it. But I'm definitely Team Canon on this one.
Yeah, unsurprising. Okay. Right, I think that's it for a bunch of questions. Thank you so much, Mehdia. I think that's a good place to call it. So hopefully people found that useful. If you've got any more questions, obviously just leave them down below and we'll be active in the chat for a little bit longer after the stream finishes, and we'll be monitoring the YouTube comments. And obviously just get in touch with Pro AV. You know, we've got a team of technical people and sales team that are more than happy to help you out if you've got any questions about the C200 or you're looking at buying any of this stuff for yourself. But thank you so much for joining us, Mehdia. I think we're going to do a couple more of these.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, I think it'd be good. So if anyone has any more products that they'd like us to do a little bit of an overview on in this sort of style, just let us know. We can do these on, I think we've got potentially the XF705 in the lineup, and maybe some more on some specific features, like maybe even browser remote could be something that's worth doing an entire stream on and demonstrating. You know, there could be a bunch
it's something that you can go into it and demonstrate it, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. But for now, anyway, thank you very much for your time, Mehdia.
Thanks everyone for watching. Well.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
The new Super 35 sensor that Canon have introduced with the C300 Mark III is quite a big step up from other S35 sensors that they have created before. From the body and the flexibility that gives us in terms of the expansion packs and the interchangeable mount, to the sensor with its increased dynamic range for tackling scenes that possibly we couldn't have tackled or captured faithfully before, I can get more out of this camera. My money goes further. It's as simple